on a glorious day. And I'd like to start the meeting by particularly welcoming Martin Dax, because Martin, this is your first meeting, isn't it?
It is indeed.
And so we did meet when we were interviewing you, and delighted that you have accepted the appointment, and look forward very much to working with you, Martin. So I don't know if, obviously, none of the other board know anything about you. I wondered if you would like to just say something very briefly at this stage about who you are and what encouraged you to join the board.
Yeah, sure. I have links to Cambridgeshire. I was actually born in Cambridge, but then moved around the world quite a lot. But I've lived in Cambridgeshire for the last 25 years. So kind of come back home. I trained as a chartered accountant and trained at Pricewaterhouse, and then spent the best part of 20 years working in the city before I took various jobs working for charities, some work for the council. And at the moment, I'm doing some teaching at a secondary school in Cambridge.
Thank you, Martin. And once again, you're very welcome. And yes, looking forward to your contributions. Can I then move on to just to welcome all those members of the public and press who are watching the live stream of this meeting via the council's website. We hope they are, possibly not though. And members, you're by now aware of the need to keep your video camera switched on for the duration of the meeting, and to keep your microphone muted except when I invite you to speak. Please click the raised hand function if you wish to ask a question or comment. Obviously, if you're having a problem with that, which does occasionally occur, just shout out and we'll deal with it in the old-fashioned way. There's always a risk that we may run into technical problems, and Joe, you know what I'm talking about there. And I would ask for your patience if we do. Should this occur, I'll declare an adjournment while the fault is addressed, and the public broadcast will be paused. If it is not possible to address the fault, the meeting may be abandoned until such time as it can be reconvened. Can I remind members and officers and public speakers that all virtual meetings will be recorded, and that these recordings will be published on the council's website. So, members, I will just confirm that everybody is here. So, Barry O'Sullivan?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yes. Councillor Dennis Payne?
Yes, Chairman, I'm present.
Councillor Elisa Machini. Sorry.
Yes, oh, don't worry, I'm here, Chair.
Thank you, you're very forgiving. And Martin Dax? Yes.
Yes.
And Val Lim? Yes.
Yes, I'm here, Chair.
Those are all the members. And in addition, we have, I don't think Daniel is actually with us, but he's on my screen. And there's also obviously, I've lost, oh yes, no, there's Rhiannon. Yes, Rhiannon's with us, and Joe Walton, Mark Whitby, and Michelle Oakinson and Paul Tyson. Those are the officers who will be presenting various reports today, and so you're all very welcome. Thank you. And moving on to the first agenda item, there are no apologies for absence. Are there any declarations of interest? And I'm not seeing any raised hands, so I'll take that as a no. Then the next agenda item is the Pension Fund Board Minutes of the 21st of February. Any comments or observations about those? Okay, so can I take it that we're happy to approve those board minutes as a correct record? Again, I'm not seeing any hands, so we will take that as agreed. And then I think that we move on to any matters arising from those minutes. It isn't actually on the agenda, but I've got a feeling we do normally do matters arising. Are there any matters arising from those minutes of the 21st of February? No, I'm not seeing any matters arising. So then we move on to the updated action log, and all the actions are marked as complete. If any members have any questions, please indicate with a raised hand. I'm not seeing any raised hands. So we'll take the action log as accepted. And well done to all of the officers for completing all of those actions. And we're also being asked to note the minutes from the Pension Fund Committee and the Pension Fund Investment Subcommittee. And I apologize for this, Rhiannon, but I do think that it would make sense for us to move these items towards the end of the agenda, that is to say, after agenda item 11, because they both contain confidential items, and it seems a bit foolish to go into confidential session twice during the course of a meeting. So if you object to us considering the committee minutes and the investment subcommittee minutes after agenda item 11, if you object to that, please raise your hand. Again, I'm not seeing any raised hands, so we'll deal with those after agenda item 11 when we will be in closed session because of the confidential asset pooling update. I think, Rhiannon, if I could just add as in the future, it might be an idea to put those items at the end of the agenda for the reasons that I said earlier. Does that cause any problem for you, Rhiannon?
No, that's fine. I'll note it there.
Much. I'd meant to mention that previously, and as I say, my apologies for not doing it then, but it just seems to make the meeting flow a bit more easily. So having done that, we're now moving on to agenda item 3, which is the petitions and public questions. And are there any petitions and public questions, Rhiannon?
We have received no petitions or public questions. So
okay,
move on.
So that's a quick agenda item again. So we're now moving on to agenda item 4, which is the administration report. And this is being presented by Joe Walton, who's the Governance and Regulations Manager. So could you introduce the report, please, Joe?
You're on mute, sorry, Joe.
Sorry, everyone. Okay, so for the benefit of Martin, who's new to the board today, this is a regular report that we bring to every meeting to consider a few items with regards to the performance of the administration for the Cambridgeshire Pension Fund. A very similar report goes to the committee as well. So just run through the report. Section 2, the key performance indicators. For this reporting period, it's just 1 month, which is February 2021. As you can see from Appendix 1, we have just one red performance indicator there, which was the transfer in, providing a transfer in quote to scheme members. We fell short of that, so it became a red target, but that was due to a performance issue within the team that's now been resolved. So you shouldn't see a repeat of that going forward. On to better news, receipt of employee and employer contributions in section 3 of the report. For the last 4 months, employers within the Cambridgeshire Pension Fund have paid on time. I don't think we've had as good a run as that for a long time, if at all. So that's pretty positive. Breaches of the law. Again, we have the usual ones that we need to report to you, which is the 15 refund of pension contributions, which were claimed by members and paid to members outside of the statutory 5-year period. And as usual, there's a qualifying note there that we expect the legislation to be changed to remove that 5-year requirement in the future. It's a bit of a thing that perhaps shouldn't have been in the regs and is being worked on to be removed. But we still have to report it as a breach because it is a breach of the law as the regulations are currently written. Section 5 of the report, internal dispute resolution procedure, is one case within this reporting period to note, and this one is a scheme member who is looking to seek reinstatement or compensation for their LDPS benefits, which they elected to transfer to an overseas pension scheme in 2015. We initially received the dispute in December 19, but these are very complicated matters to resolve. So it's taken a little while to gather all the information we need through the claims management company. So we've now been able to reach a point where we've been able to make a decision on the case, and we haven't upheld it at this stage. The member has the opportunity to go to stage 2 of the internal dispute resolution procedure, but they haven't done as yet. So that's all I really wanted to talk through in the report. So happy to take any questions if anyone has any.
Joe, thank you very much for that concise and to the point report, and congratulations on getting all of the payments in. That's the first time I think I've seen that in one of the reports, so well done. And members, any questions or comments?
Oh, put the wrong one up.
I think Dennis beat you, Val. So
Yes.
Councillor Payne first, and then Val. Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Chairman. Not wishing to spoil things, but just questioning whether the excellent performance was continued in February and March.
I don't have that information to hand. It takes March we won't know about until just about now, because the employers have until 19th of April to pay the contributions over, and it takes a few days to reconcile.
Okay.
But no, unfortunately, I don't have that to hand, but we'll certainly see it in the next report.
Is that okay, Dennis? Val, over to you.
You're on mute, Val.
Sorry. Item 4, breaches of the law. Item 5, the dates all are different dates. Is this due to when you actually get the information actually in from people? Because I noticed 4 is February or February. Number 5 is February to March. They all sort of vary.
Yeah, that is true. Because of the long lead-in time to these reports, we have to ask various departments within our service for this information, and then we can write the report thereafter. So there are some differences in the reporting period. For example, section 4, that's done by the operations team and managed by the operations team. Section 5, that's managed by myself. So I tend to have more up-to-date information, and because I write the report, it feeds in last. So whilst we try and get everything in the same reporting period, where we can provide more up-to-date information, we do try to do so. But no, I take your point.
Okay. And I have another question as well, Chair, I'm afraid.
Yes, of course, Val. Go ahead.
Item 7, you talk about the pension fund objectives. When I look at the objectives which actually line into the risks on item 8, we seem to have a lot more objectives than we do actually have risk and what the controls are. I just wonder really what benefit we're getting from seeing all the fund objectives when there's only a few of the risks, and where the controls lie. Because if I take objective 2 and objective 3, then the risks actually only align to, I think it's number 8. Maybe we need to have a look at this offline, Joe.
Yeah, I think it follows on from the discussion we had with you last week, I think it was. But yes, we take your point there again, Val, as well.
So I think that's a well-made point, Joe. And Do you see, are there any difficulties in realigning our risks in the way that Val has suggested?
I think it's a presentational matter, I think, really.
Okay.
I think we need to be a bit more careful when we're putting in the objectives that they're matching up to the risks and where we've referenced them. But then that might be easier said than done in some circumstances. But yeah, I think perhaps we'll have a look and see what we can do better there, just to make sure it all kind of follows through. But we did have a very long conversation with Val about our objectives and our risks, and then we didn't actually speak about how it fed through into reports. So but yeah, it's something we're very aware of, and we will be working on it.
Would it, do you think that it would be something that could be amended in time for the next pension board meeting, or is it too big a job for
that? It might be a bit too big for July, only because of the lead-in time. You wouldn't believe how long the lead-in time is to writing these reports.
Oh,
so,
sure, yeah.
And then having to do the work as well. So, and given what we have ahead of us, which is an election and training required for that. So July might be a bit optimistic, but certainly it is on our radar.
I think it would be useful, so we don't lose it, that we perhaps add that to the action plan. Joe, would that be all right?
Yep, that's fine.
Yeah. So if we add it to the action plan and perhaps put a tentative completion date, not the July meeting, but the one after that, would that be feasible, do you think?
Yes, thank you. Yep.
Yeah.
So Chairman, for absolute clarity, what is the issue? Is it the issue, the objectives under risk log, or the objectives that go into each report?
I understood from Val's question that what she was saying was the way that the risks align with the objectives.
Okay.
Am I right in that, Val?
There's a bit of both. One is, overall the risk management framework and how the objectives and the risks and controls are actually aligned. But also in these reports, I don't really know what value we're getting from, sort of all these objectives here when they actually don't actually align to the risks on the following page.
Okay, right, thank you.
Is that right, Mark?
Yeah, no, that's fine, that's fine.
Can I just add one thing? I think the amount of work involved for Jo to actually get some of this done is actually going to take quite a long time. I'd like to support what she actually said.
But Jo did say that she was content with a tentative 6-month period to do it, which I think, obviously, if there are difficulties, Val, Jo will be upfront and tell us that, she hasn't had a chance to do it. And, but I think that, it would be nice to try and get it done within the next 6 months, if that is feasible. So is everybody happy with that? And I'm not seeing any more raised hands. So what we're being asked to do is to review the current risks, and I believe we've done that, and everybody is happy with the agreed action.
That's actually the next report, the recommendation. The recommendation is just to note this one, I think.
Oh, it is, yes, and then I'm sorry, yes, I was jumping ahead of myself. Forgive me, Jo.
It's okay.
The next one is Michelle, the risk monitoring, yes. So Michelle, over to you. Agenda item 5, risk monitoring.
Yes, thank you. So as you'll remember, in February, we did quite a bit of an overhaul in terms of pension scams and cybercrime. And officers went through and updated a lot of the controls to ensure those aspects were covered. One recommendation that came out of that from members was to make sure that we were looking at the areas regarding officer laptops and Wi-Fi security. So I just wanted to clarify in section 2.2, we have addressed that issue now and updated risk 13 to make sure that that specific element is covered. So going back to this particular risk review, upon this one, officers have had another look through and obviously updated anything that we felt was appropriate to do so. Some of the smaller detail has been updated just to make it presentationally a bit better. But more importantly, in section 2.1, some added controls have been identified also. Again, just things that have either not been on there before or not been clear enough, or things that have developed so they are in a position where they can go on now. So as you'll see in the table, we've added some extra detail on 5 extra controls. So things such as just to really confirm the internal and external audit perspective in there on risk 9. On risk 11, we already had an administration strategy, but that's just put in there as a control just to absolutely highlight that there is one in place, and we do refer to it and use it in the correct way. Again, with the data asset mapping, this links back to the last conversation we had in terms of cybercrime. So just really to highlight that that activity is going on, and that should prove a really valuable benefit in terms of our risk with third parties. And then under risk 19, just 2 further controls added there, just really to make the policy as robust as possible. So they're the changes that we're proposing to make to the main risk register itself with your agreement today. Just briefly, just to talk about the short to medium term risks in section 3 of the report. Really, there's no change. The impact of the pandemic has obviously been on the agenda for a few meetings now. Really, we're in exactly the same position on that as we have been in previous months as well. Everything continues as it is for now, with no change in the way we're working or the processes involved in that. Following the last meeting, there's a slight, well, the update in terms of the public sector exit cap. Obviously, that Joe talked in quite detail last time about how that was revoked. But in terms of the risk, it is still actually on there because we are expecting something to come back on that at some point in the near future in some kind of different form. So we just need to be mindful that when that comes in, we need to be ready to deal with whatever the outcome of that is. And lastly, and probably the one that's kind of on the radar at the moment more so, is under 3.3. Obviously, with the elections coming up, we are expecting change of membership, possibly, well, I say expecting there could be change of membership board and committee wise. So it's just really for us to keep that a bit on the radar in terms of there could be no change or some change. And really this is a linked one with the committee as well, in terms of we need to make sure that everybody has the appropriate skills and knowledge to be able to undertake their roles effectively. And this also obviously covers new members, like obviously we've got Martin on board now. So the new training that's coming in June will support our new members as well. And obviously any changes that come up after the 6th of May as well. So they're really the main highlights of the reports. I'm happy obviously to take any comments or if you've got any further suggestions or updates that you feel would be appropriate to the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Michelle. Again, that comprehensive introduction. And members, any questions or comments? I'm not seeing any raised hands, Michelle. I just have a couple of quick ones. So do you have inside knowledge on my electoral prospects, Michelle?
Absolutely none. Sorry, it was just a kind of, I think on the committee more so, we know that some people aren't standing, so I do apologise for that.
No, not at all.
Kind of a bit of a mixed comment. Some people we know definitely aren't coming back, and some people obviously we don't know.
I was being mischievous, and I hope to be back, and obviously I don't know if I'll be reappointed to the pension board, but we'll see on that one.
Back as well.
Well, that's very kind, Michelle. Thank you. And Elisa, you're standing for re-election, aren't you?
Yes, I am indeed. But
Good.
like you, I don't know what the proportionality rules will be like.
No,
So
but
we shall find out.
I do hope we can welcome you back as well. And Dennis, Councillor Payne, are you up for re-election?
Chairman, parish council elections for us are next year, not this year. But it's approximately 35 years since we actually even had a poll. So if I decide to stand, I will probably be back next year.
This is one of the good things, isn't it, about parish councils, that that you do such a good job that you don't have to have elections. So, so I just wanted to ask a question other than on the elections. So, Michelle, I think the thing that's important about that is that at the worst you'll have 2 new members, and obviously we've got 2 excellent and experienced members in Val and Martin, and obviously the existing members as well with Barry and Dennis. So I hope that won't affect our effectiveness at all, whether or not I'm here and whether or not Elisa is here. So looking at the risk register, Michelle, I noticed that there are a couple, 3 ambers, aren't there actually, I think. And I just wondered if you wanted to say anything specifically. Sorry, no, 5 ambers. I just wondered if you want to say anything specifically about those ambers.
If I may interject, they've been ambers for quite a while, so they haven't changed. We do find that our risk register doesn't really change a lot, which may be an issue in itself. But yeah, they have been like that for a considerable period of time. So
I think the thought with the ambers, this came up on our conversation with Val last week as well, is they tend to be the ones that we cannot fully control. So whereas, for example, it could be, I think it's the employer contributions, isn't it? Yeah, the first one. So we could do absolutely everything in our power to help employers pay their contributions on time. But with every will in the world, if they can't or won't pay, it's not something we can force. Whereas some of the other risks that maybe fall into the green category are all internal, or we have better influence on. So yeah, like Joe says, they have been amber probably most of the way through, just because with the best bill in the world, we can't 100% guarantee that. Oh, you're on mute, Councillor King.
Indeed. Thank you very much indeed, Michelle. My apologies. What particularly occurred to me about that was that as we've got such a good record of getting payments in, it does seem a little quixotic, perhaps, that we should still be on amber, for that one. That's just an example. And I suppose that I would be more comfortable having something on green or red, even if it doesn't stay there for each meeting.
Yeah.
So that's just my personal thought, but
I think in general, coming out from the meeting that we had from Val last week, and obviously what was talked about in the previous report, there are definitely some changes that we want to make to the risk register, and obviously the way that they're linking into the reports. And I think one of the other things that was identified was some kind of reporting on the internal controls. So again, it's a big piece of work that we can't rush, but the long-term aim is to have a proper overhaul of the risk register and the reports, and try and get it all linking through and demonstrating to you that those controls are working effectively. Yeah.
I think that's a good point, Michelle, and also, a very good point that Val raised previously. Can we incorporate that into the action plan, as we discussed previously, and perhaps again for a 6-month period? Is that reasonable, Michelle, or do you think that's too optimistic?
Can I come in there, please, Chairman?
Of course.
I think it's so significant. It's actually a business plan activity. If I look at what's on our business plan, they are activities of this magnitude would normally go on there. So perhaps actually what we need to do is to add an additional activity. which we can, we're taking the, or we're retaking the business plan to the pensions committee at their first meeting, because obviously there'll be lots of new members. So it's not particularly for approval, it's just so they're aware of what we're working to. That's probably how I would deal with it.
Fellow pension board members, are you happy with Mark's suggestion? That seems like a very good idea to me.
I'm happy with Mark's suggestion. I think that's reasonable.
Thank you, Val. Your hand was up for that.
Yeah, no, my hand's up for something else, actually.
Oh, is it? Oh, sorry, forgive me. So, Val, do you want to just come in here?
Yeah, I'll make a comment. This time I've actually read through all of the risk register, and I do have a number of comments, but I'm happy to obviously take these offline with Joe and Michelle at some point in time, which works in with their diary.
Lovely.
If you're happy to do that, Val, it's not something that you feel needs to be minuted in the pension board minutes at this stage.
No.
Okay. Thank you for that, Val. And Martin, your hand is up.
Yeah, just a point and a question. I know risk registers can be extremely onerous and very difficult to make comprehensive. I think I've only seen one method in my whole career that worked really, really well. And that was designed by a guy I knew at the Institute of Chartered Management Accountants. So as you start to link in internal controls, I'll be happy to share how that was done. It wasn't onerous and it was very comprehensive. But my question, just looking at this, was just in relation to the cybersecurity, and particularly with that being a new risk. The way that the risks are evaluated, it's not a linear relationship. So essentially, it's quite hard to say that, say, a rating of 12 is twice as problematic as a 6. It doesn't work that way. And the cyber risk doesn't look as though we've allocated a high risk to it. Now, when I look at the risk register, administration, everyone seems to be all over administration. Valuation and management of the fund and its assets, all over that. IT is the one that does concern me, and particularly because I notice as we go through the various documentation, there's mention about the challenges that are being faced, and IT and cybersecurity seems to be one of those. There's also the mention that scams being perpetrated against members are causing problems for the pension fund itself. So that's, again, a cyber problem, but it's outside of your control. And I'm just wondering that when you, it's only been an initial assessment, but do you feel that a 4 is an adequate rating at this stage, or do you feel that this is going to need to be broken down a little bit more and that there might be more risk there?
Okay, firstly, thank you ever so much for your offer to help us when we get to the stages of doing the internal control, but that would be really useful for us. In terms of the IT risk, I think, so just a bit of background on the risk register. When we first did the risk register, it was huge. We basically separated out every single risk that we had. And I think we had 54 risks, and we were really struggling to manage it internally in terms of managers, having to review those continuously. So we got to a point where we tried to streamline the risk register as much as we could under kind of strategic umbrellas. I think probably what's happened over time in terms of the IT one is originally it was an IT risk that's kind of had cybercrime attached to it, because obviously over the last couple of years or so, cybercrime is becoming a lot more prominent. So I think probably when we do the next review, and I'm sure Joe or Mark will come in and give their view, but it's possible that we might separate that one back out again, because it seems to be quite a niche thing that we're kind of moving to look at, and we're putting in a lot of extra resource on cyber resilience now, which is in the business plan. So I agree that maybe that needs looking at in terms of, firstly, whether it needs to be separated out, and secondly, whether that needs a new risk rating attached to it. But I'll hand over to Mark or Joe to say whether that's a fair assessment or
Yeah.
Thank you, Joe. Mark, Joe, any further comments?
I guess obviously, I'll touch on this in more detail in a moment when we look at the business plan activities, but obviously we've got a quite significant piece of work around cybercrime we're doing, which will help us understand where our risks are. In particular, the next bit is around that we're looking at is the sort of where our data sits and what the risks of it sitting in different places is, and the transition arrangements. So I think it probably would make sense if we do separate out cybercrime. I think the issue with this has been if you start with a gross impact of 4 and a gross likelihood of 2, and you put in place in controls, then you've got to shift somewhere from that point, you would hope. Otherwise, what's the point in the controls? Whether it's completely right, I think it does feel like the cyber risk itself could be a bit higher at the moment. Particularly because in the Cambridgeshire space, I mean, as we know, there's been across the country, there's been quite a few educational establishments recently hit by attacks. Even in Peterborough, where I live. So I think, yes, to cut through it, I think it probably makes sense to separate it out, and the cyber risk will be probably higher than it sits at the moment.
Thank you very much for that, Mark. And Joe, anything you want to add to that?
No, Mark's echoed my thoughts.
Okay.
So.
That's good. And Martin, anything you would like to add to that?
No, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your very kind offer. And I'm sure that will be taken up. And a very good suggestion about the cybercrime issue. I think you've still got, you've taken your hand down. Thank you. So we're being asked to, I'll get it right this time, we're being asked to review the current risk facing the fund. And I think we've done that. And we've come up with some proposals. So is everybody happy that we move on to the next agenda item? Right. So we're now moving on to agenda item 6, which is the business plan update. And Mark, could I ask you to introduce this, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I will only concentrate on a few of the activities here, because obviously we have a new business plan on the next agenda item, and the ones which are carrying over in particular, obviously we can discuss in more detail then. But if I just go through the report and just pull out a few. So page 68, as I mentioned, the cybercrime, we undertook a sort of an analysis of our risks with Aon, our governance provider, who have obviously expertise in that space as well, looking at where we were compared to other local authority funds. I don't think they had much many responses at the time they did ours, but they felt we were aligned really in terms of our progress with other local authority funds, which is that we were really at the start of our cyber journeys. And so what we'll be doing as part of the next year's business plan, or indeed it will very, very shortly, we'll be sort of completing the initial work, is putting in place a cyber strategy, which effectively contains an action plan of, prioritised over the next 12 to 24 months what activities we're going to be undertaking. But right front and centre on that, as I mentioned, will be some work on asset mapping. As I said, where we have quite a few third-party suppliers who may at various times hold some data. We have obviously our software platform itself is all hosted by a third-party provider. So it's just looking at what the risks around that is and what we need to do, which will probably involve sort of a questionnaire, so we understand in more depth what's happening at each of those providers. So cybercrime is certainly one we're taking forward, but as I say, there was some late action at the very end of last year. The next one I just wanted to bring to your attention was 3.3.4 on page 71, the multiple investment strategies. So the Pensions Committee approved some work with the actuary to look at what the impact of having multiple investment strategies would be. So would there be a material benefit in doing that? So the Pensions Committee approved some expenditure on that, and that's actually taken longer than Hyman's, our actuary, expected. So that whilst it was started at the end of the year, that work is flowing into this year. And as soon as we have something tangible, we will be starting to make a decision on whether that's something we want to progress further. 3.5.2, some news. Mercer were reappointed as our investment consultant. It was a very competitive process, but ultimately Mercer did win the retender. That does mean, of course, that the onboarding isn't as lengthy as it would be if we had a new provider, but we are going to have a sit down with Mercer just to make sure actually that in a pooled environment, so with access, what the expectations of a consultant are different from what they were in the past. And so we're just going to work with them to make sure that we have something which is fit for purpose going forward. And actually also with responsible investment coming right to the forefront in terms of everything we do in the investment space. We also appointed, as you will be aware, an independent advisor, Samjavesh Jones. So that was 3.5.4. That happened obviously towards the end of the year as well. The RI policy, those who watched the last pensions committee or observed that will know that's locally the Cambridgeshire Fund is getting a lot of inquiries around things like divestment, the Palestine debate, companies that are supportive there. But we have a really robust policy that we're looking to put out to public consultation in April. So that's we did a lot of that work at the tail end of the year. 3.5.7, we've been working very recently on putting in place a framework for global custody with the rest of the access pool, which means that locally we can now pull down off of that framework. But the only other thing I wanted to bring attention to on this was the financials. And if you're eagle-eyed, you may have spotted that the forecast or the end of year forecast here, which we're obviously still, when you're still in a closed down period, that can still move a bit. But that end of year forecast is more up to date than what's in the business plan on the next thing. So simply because the business plan is what we presented to the committee, and over recent weeks we've changed things. In particular, you'll note on page 77 that we had a very large transfer coming from Lincolnshire that we did not expect to come in last year, but did literally on the last few days. And equally a transfer out, slightly smaller. But I think anything above total income less expenditure has been moving slightly. And so that will be more up to date than the business plan itself, which is just simply a repeat of what went to committee. Okay, but I'll open up to any questions or comments.
Thank you, Mark. Just a point of clarification. You mentioned that you were going out in April. Is that April of this year?
For what, sorry?
Oh, it was when you were
RI policy, did I say?
Yes.
Oh, I actually, sorry. We were going to go out in April, but we are actually going to we'll put it out just after the elections.
Okay, so
yeah,
sort of mid-May.
Yeah. It will be, as soon as we can after the election. So we're forming. There's quite a bit of communications that we need to align, both, if you like, a supporting statement at the front of it, what we're putting on web pages, what we're putting out, the message to employers, those sorts of things. So it is, we're just aligning all of those communications at the moment.
But thanks for that clarification, Mark. And questions or comments? I see that Barry, you have your hand up, and then Val. So Barry, over to you.
Okay, it's just a little typo I spotted. So on page 70, the prepare for the 2022 valuation, it says that the second line down, it says the next valuation is due 31st of March 2022, and then goes on to say the fund results will be issued in summer of 2020. I'm guessing that should say 2022.
It is, yeah. So the final results need to be published by the 31st of March 2023, but we obviously have some results in the summer after the data work's been done. Yeah, apologies.
Well spotted, Barry. And Val, you had your hand up as well.
Yeah, I've got two questions, Chair. One is that you talk about retendering and sort of possibly extending some of the contracts. I just wonder, is there likely to be too much retendering time you get to 23, 24, if some of the extensions go ahead?
Yeah, so the actuary, we need to align with the valuation cycle and make sure that we have at the start of a new contract or the start of a new provider at the right time. The governance and benefits we're more relaxed about, but I think it comes down to what's the most efficient way of procuring all of those services, because the same provider can provide them all. We're mindful that we've got the software supplier framework, which we absolutely have to go out to tender this time. So that's a huge piece of work if we were to change. So you've got a year lead-in time on that. So you need to, you need a year lead-in time after you've completed the tender process. So you're about a year and a half in advance of the date. So I think I think the reassuring thing is that different strategic leads might lead on different procurements. So I have, and obviously a number of direct reports into me, and it tends to be those that lead with my support on the ones where it's required. So we have quite a bit of resource at the strategic level to be able to cope with that.
Okay, that's good. And I've just got one other question, please, Mark. In 3.4.2, you talk about potential liability reduction exercises, and you talk about pensions in payment of a very low value. What do you call very low value? What's the figure in the Cambridgeshire Pension Fund?
I'm going to ask if Joe or Michelle remember what it is. It's a de minimis amount set in legislation, but off the top of my head, I'm not sure what it is.
Yes, Val, we'll be looking at very small pensions that are commutable. Even some small pensions cannot be commuted as well. So it's really, we need to look very carefully at what, there is a particular size, but in some cases, there are pensions that can't be commuted, even though they are very small. So it's a bit of a complicated regulation, but
is it a couple £100 or something like that, though?
Yeah, but it depends. I think it depends on other factors as well. So pensions in payment elsewhere and things like that. So it's not a very straightforward. It's not like putting a £10 value on it and saying that's it. It is a bit more to it than that. There isn't the detail in the report for that reason.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're perfectly. So we obviously have lots of these in payment, and this is obviously, it creates a greater efficiency if they weren't there and people actually received the cash, the lump sum, instead of the ongoing payment. I would say that's the exercise. I said this for this year. I'll say it for next year. If push comes to shove and we've got resource pressures, then this is the activity we won't progress. Because it's what we're doing at the moment is perfectly compliant with legislation. It's just trying to create efficiencies.
Yeah, I was just asking the question because where I used to work before, they also had a level and they were doing a program like this. So it was just really out of interest.
Thank you, Val, for that. And I'm not seeing any other hands raised. And so we're being asked to note the business plan update to the end of March of this year, and I believe we have done that. And so if everybody is content, we will move on to the next agenda item. Before we do that, though, I just wanted to jump back, and this was my fault. Martin raised, I think, this very important point about the risk level of cybercrime. Mark, do you think it would be appropriate to have that as a separate action point on our action plan?
Well, we will bring in. So if I discuss that actually in the next agenda item, because I will be talking about what's in the report about what the role of the local pension board is in regarding cybercrime. Would that be okay, Chairman?
Happy with that. I just do agree very much that it is an increasing threat, and I just want to make sure that we properly acknowledge it in order to to do our work properly. So moving on then, Mark, to agenda item 7, Could you introduce the annual business plan, please?
I will. Thank you, Chairman. So this was approved by the Pensions Committee in March. The last meeting of the Pensions Committee as it is currently formed in terms of its membership. If I just step through it and just pick up any particular elements I want to highlight, the first thing is on page 5 and the service itself. So after the report had been drafted, but before the committee, I got agreement to sort of mobilise a slightly different structure that provides a greater ability for us to deal with projects, to give Joe some more time to deal with governance, to give Corey some more time to deal with employer work. And in short, I'm adding an additional direct report into myself, which is a systems and projects manager. It's still been put in place informally because there's a service review progress as part of the new unitary programme at Northamptonshire, which means that each service has to just wait in turn to finalise reviews. But it's been agreed by the Section 151. It won't dramatically impact the budget. But I would just flag that I am trying to do something to help us deal with some of the projects that you'll see later a little bit better, as well as to be able to give, as I say, more capacity in certain areas. So if I just turn to the activity, well, sorry, to the financials themselves, as I mentioned, the forecast for last year will be not as up to date as the one in the previous one, but the expenditure for the projected expenditure for the current year is in line with what we expect. The only thing I'll say on the actual the figures is on page 11. You'll notice the data improvement projects has dramatically reduced, and that's because we were doing some outsourcing through Aon. I am looking to in-house that activity, hence the need to have that role change I just mentioned. Whether we've got the right resourcing is quite difficult to judge at the moment because of the pandemic and the fact everyone is working remotely, and that brings of its own challenges. So I will keep that under review, and obviously if any increase is required, we'll obviously report that through the quarterly reporting process through committee and through yourselves. Okay, if I just then turn to, as I promised, page 98 and cyber resilience strategy. What you'll note there is we're developing the strategy and the action plan and the mapping, as I mentioned, that questionnaire I talked about, but we will be looking to utilise the pension fund board to provide scrutiny to that in advance of it going to the pensions committee. So there is a role there around about July for you to assist us in that process. So you can obviously see the timeline as that's quite early in the year. I mean, as I say, it's fair to say I think there will be some quick wins, but the overall strategy and action plan is likely to take a year plus. But front loading the bits that we really must do as a priority. The other highlights in the plan, obviously we've got the McLeod age discrimination remedy. This current year is about getting data up to date with what employers will be providing us with. That's probably the easy part compared to what comes next, which is the remedy in future years. Obviously that will be subject to the national timelines, but no doubt a big piece of work. We have the valuation of the pension fund. The activity this year is us starting to obviously develop the plans with the actuary, and obviously training around valuation will be a big important matter for committee and for board, because some people will obviously be coming fresh into this. The undecided leavers is obviously a big project again. That's the one activity I'd say we really struggled with last year. We stood still. There's no two ways of looking at it in terms of the progress we made. I am looking to a more I guess a way of reporting these that makes more sense, and that is that if something is more than 6 months old, it's a backlog, no matter where it's being processed within the service. So I will be having a discrete team who will be targeting processing backlog, but no matter how, where a case sits, if it's over 6 months old, we'll be treating it as a backlog, and we'll be reporting it as something that we want to, baseline and then reduce down over the course of a year. The most important thing, though, to start with is making sure that we stabilise and have no further build-up, and that's not necessarily just an admin authority issue. That's making sure we get information in from employers and that it's accurate, and that we have any queries, they feed back to us. So it's as much managing employers as it is doing work ourselves. And then finally, if I just move on to the investment activities, the RI policy on page 104, I do see as one of the really huge activities this year. We will be communicating shortly. I expect we'll get plenty of feedback with very disparate views from that feedback. But come what may, at the end of it, the reporting requirements that we're going to have in that space are light years from where we are at the moment, and a lot of that will have to come from the asset pool. And so, for that reason, that's one of the reasons I'm sort of chairing a task and finish group at the pool level to put those in place at that pool level. The property strategy is something we're looking at. So property is, I guess, the asset class we're particularly looking at, whether what we have in place at the moment is fit for purpose over the medium term. And I know this will please those of you who have seen our reporting around investments, but the benchmarking and reporting of that, particularly for alternative asset classes, is a priority, because at the moment it's very hard to understand how well they are performing. I'll leave it there. I'm conscious I've said quite a lot, so I'm happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you for that very comprehensive and useful introduction of the report, Mark. So, members, any questions? I have Dennis and Val. So I'll take Councillor Payne first.
Thank you, Chairman. I think Val did actually get there slightly ahead of me, but there we go.
My apologies, Val. I'm sorry for that.
Mark, I've got a couple of questions on financials. One of which is that at the moment, the value of our contributions exceed the value of the benefits payable, and that's great. Just wondering if you have a feel as to when they will be switched round the other way. And then the other question I've got is about your forecast on staff-related admin costs, which increase very slowly and actually increase far slower than, say, the rate of increase of the contribution costs, which I assume is related to salaries. So I'm just curious as to why that apparent differential. Thank you.
Yes, I mean the staff costs are obviously, as well as the increment we put on each year, is obviously based on the actual numbers we've got. I think this doesn't include any additional post for an additional direct report to me, because as obviously it was drafted prior to that even informal approval. But it should be. I mean, obviously the contributions, remember, are also reflective of a number of other factors, not just the what payrolls are likely to increase by. It's the profile of the contributions over a 3-year period. So you tend to get sometimes you get a lumpy bit in year one, where employers pay a lot in and then they pay less over subsequent years. It's a number of staff they've got within their organisations, the number of staff that are pensionable. So we have a lot playing into that contribution line. But it should broadly be moving in the same direction and at a similar rate, I would say.
Well,
You've seen a big difference, Councillor Payne.
oh, sorry. I mean, the contributions, if I look at 2021 onwards, are 119, 121, 123. Yeah. Whereas your staff-related costs are going up from, well, 1597 to 16 to 1603, which is a 0.2% increase. It just didn't feel balanced. I know that the admin costs are trivial, I suppose a concern to make sure your staff are being paid appropriately.
Yeah, well, they are being paid. They've been paid appropriately, and it may be that we've actually understated the inflationary uplift, because that what you just described doesn't. I mean, to be frank, there. I think it generally it has been restricted pretty much to inflationary uplifts. When I say inflationary, it can be less than the rate of inflation, because it is what it is. But we will have a look at that. I mean, what we'll do when we take it back to committee at the first meeting is I do need to, well, perhaps sorry, I'll rephrase that. When we take it, we'll take the plan as it was approved back to the committee. But when we do the first update, we will be looking at those lines, because I do then need to reflect any expected variances. So it's a point well made, Councillor Payne, that what you just described does sound like it's slightly understated. And
do you have a feel when we'll go cash negative?
Cash negative, it's been projected it was about 5 years, ahead. I think understanding what cash negative means, it's quite important, because we do get quite a bit of income in that we could utilise, i.e. not reinvest, so it actually comes back in. So even after the actual the cash flows out exceed the cash flows in, I've got a whole load of other additional headroom. The thing that has also helped on that front, which probably wasn't built in to the last time we took a detailed look, was that some of the charges have moved from being paid out of cash at a local level to being deducted from within the pooled environment. So it's been, they've been taken directly from the sub fund with Link, whereas before we used to have to find that money and pay it. So that's also helped considerably on the cash flow front. So that was feeding in at one point to the total investment expenses line on page 11. But what we do, the actuary will be assisting us with an exercise to look at that again very shortly. So as soon as we have something, we'll obviously feed back to you on that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. And Val.
Sorry, you're on mute, Val.
Sorry, thanks, Mark. I'm also on the budget. If I look at page 92 and look some of the way down here where it says investment income, first of all, it says less taxes on income, but all the figures, I think, are related to profit losses on disposal. Yes. They're sort of on the wrong line. Also, if I compare this year's budget to your appendix 2 on page 77, your profit or losses are now in, some of them in brackets. They're opposite way to what they were in 2021. And it's same with net increase, decrease in net assets.
So you compare it to page 77. Sorry, you're absolutely correct that the version that went to committee, which this is, we had a misalignment over the thing. So yes, the dash relates to taxes and the profit and losses. I think what what I asked them to do when we did the update was on the variances, just make sure that the brackets made sense. So the totals were working out in terms of the estimate and the forecast, but the variances, when you worked your way down, they didn't total up in the way that you'd expect. So I just asked the team to correct that. It was just the way I believe just the way the variances were presented, whether they were a negative or a positive. So so the way it should be and is on the update is if it's positive to the fund, it's a positive, i.e., cash flow in. If it's a negative to the fund, it's a negative, and that flows all the way through the variances. If that makes sense.
Let me think about that.
Well, it took honestly, we spent quite a bit of time on it. It's one of those things where you get everything right, and then on the variances, it's you just need to work your way through how it makes sense. I don't know if Martin wants to come in.
I think it's just the description, page 10, bottom left-hand corner of the table, where it says net increase, decrease. The brackets are just on the wrong word.
Okay.
The brackets should be on decrease. It's a common just typo. It's not a big thing.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, we have a slightly because we administer two funds. I'm afraid they do them in opposite ways as well. That's which also confounds us sometimes. But thank you for that, Martin. Thank you, Val.
And one other question is, you've got budgets in respect of all your work in part 2, but I don't really see how these feed into, I assume, into your admin expenses. Is that correct? And I don't really see the breakdown of how much each of your sort of actions are being what money you're spending on that, and which of the categories it feeds through into the admin expenses.
Yeah, I mean, it does depend. So they don't all feed into admin expenses. So if you're talking about, for example, consultancy expenditure, it feeds into governance expenses. So it is. So the admin expenditure is expanded, obviously below in the last table on page 93. But a lot of the governance expenditure is in that second line. So what we tend to do, obviously, is if there's significant expenditure in anything, whether that's investment consultancy or actuarial, then the committee does see what that cost is. For example, the investment strategy, they had to approve the cost of that. If Mercer are doing a particular project around around any investment area, they get told what it is. So that's where and indeed, I think the pension committee, Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, at the last meeting they asked for a breakdown of what the governance expenditure was last year.
Yes, that's correct, Mark.
So we will be providing that, and we're happy to share that around as well with yourselves.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Val and Martin. You are making a very valuable contribution to the board, both of you, and very grateful for the effort and the time you put into studying the reports. Thank you. Mark, this is probably a really stupid question after the very intelligent questions and comments preceding it, but I was looking at the list of objectives on page 87, and I didn't see an objective there about responsible investment. Do we not have one, and will we be getting one, or did I miss it?
There hasn't been one I don't believe in the broadest sense. That's a very good point. Sorry?
Isn't it covered in the monitoring and managing risk?
It's on the risk register in terms of the systemic risk of climate change, but in terms of that's something we can consider, Councillor King. I don't believe it's in there as a fund objective. I mean, to be clear, these are just simply the fund objectives which the committee have agreed. There's no further analysis of them other than a lift and shift of what's already there. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a valid question. It's something we need to think about because I don't think we've actually reflected on that point.
Well, my thought was particularly with the work that you're doing on responsible investment, it would be, again, sort of odd not to have that as one of our objectives. It needs to be carefully phrased, I think, because we don't want to commit ourselves to something that we can then be beaten over the head with. But I think that it is an important thing, investing responsibly, and I would kind of like us to see it in there. I don't know what other board members feel. Any other comments or questions? I'm not seeing any raised hands, so I think that probably, well, may I take it that people would like to see a responsible investment objective in that list of agreed objectives? Okay, Mark?
I did raise my hand, Chair, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, you did, Barry. It was after I looked. Do go.
Yeah, it was just to really support your view that clearly it's an important part of what we're doing going forward, looking at responsible investment. So I would also say that it should really be in the business plan to not reflect it. It seems a bit lacking.
Thank you, Barry. I'm not seeing any other raised hands, so I'll take that it's unanimous that we'd like to see that objective. So the next question, Mark, is: do you think we ought to add that to our action plan, that a responsible investment objective will be developed?
I think it probably does need to be reflected that was your view. I mean, our work and promises that we'll go away and obviously it's obviously a committee impacts on the committee as well. So we need to obviously look at what the ramifications of that are. I don't know off the top of my head. I don't see. I'm sure we can come up with a wording that would satisfy all parties. Absolutely.
Excellent. Thanks, Mark.
Yes, put it in the action plan.
So I think Rhiannon, if you could add that to our action plan. And Mark, I asked a question previously about the amendment to the cybercrime risk being in the action plan. Do you feel that should be there or not?
So I think it won't harm putting it in there, but I think it will fall out of the work anyway. But I think to be absolutely clear, you've raised it as a point, and therefore put it in there as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Mark. That's my feeling. I don't feel we lose anything by putting it in. No. And, it does set out, that we do have justifiable concerns in that area, not because of anything that's lacking in our administration, but at how clever people are who are trying to, who are getting up to no good. So, Rhiannon, could you add both of those into the action plan, please?
Of course.
Thank you very much. So moving on to our next, oh, sorry, I didn't do this properly. What we need to do is to note the business plan and medium-term strategy. We've discussed it. And so if that could just be recorded that we are noting it.
I think Martin has got his hand up still.
Oh, sorry. Martin, yes, forgive me.
No, it's okay. Just trying to find the mute button. Just reading through the various minutes, I did notice that the committee it seemed quite a contentious issue, the responsible investment strategy. So it was quite contentious for the committee and the subcommittee. Whose responsibility is it? Where does it lie to actually determine what the responsible investment strategy would be?
So the responsible investment strategy fits within the investment strategy, which is the responsibility of the pensions committee. So what we did is we utilised the investment subcommittee to, having canvassed the views of everybody, including local pension board members. We used the investment subcommittee to do the heavy lifting to get a workable new RI policy. It got unanimous approval there. It went to the pensions committee, and there was one member who obviously did have a different view, but obviously there was no support for that alternative view. So it's the pensions committee.
Right. That's brilliant. Thank you.
And just to add to that, Martin, thank you. Obviously, we can have input into that because, as I have previously described it, we have the role of being effectively a critical friend to the work of the Pension Committee. I have to say, just echoing what Mark said, that there was just a lone voice that was very critical of it, and his thought was that we ought to be being more radical. And while I have a lot of sympathy with that, I think the danger is that we must never forget that our job is to ensure that we provide pensions to the people who have contributed. And so it's a tightrope that has to be walked. And I think we're in the right place, personally. So that's my view. And I don't know whether any of the other pension board members share that. I think that Val and Dennis, you were at that pension committee, weren't you?
Yes, Chairman. But rather than comment on that, I mean, you said that we might have some input to this, but I note that I'm just wondering when the board will have the opportunity to review and comment on the responsible investment strategy.
Mark, would you like to answer that, please?
Well, so it's going out. So it's been approved. It's going out to consultation. So post consultation, it's coming back to look at what that means in terms of do we need to update it. I guess this is what the one we obviously got quite a bit where we're looking at pre-scrutiny from yourselves. This wasn't necessarily one where we were, unless you feel strongly that you would like to. I mean, we are keen to get it in place. To be clear, where I'm coming from is we're very, very keen to have this in place so we can actually start looking at what that means for our assets that we hold, look at low carbon solutions, look at the reporting, etc. we need in place. But I am mindful, obviously, the governance process here. So if you are feeling that you want to have pre-scrutiny over it, then I think probably now is the time to let us know, and we will build that in.
Mark, may I just make a comment on the policy? So we did give this careful consideration, and it's all about getting in the right order. So the consultation that we've structured, which is getting close to being ready to go out, will be to the members of the scheme and employers. And we felt that there wasn't much value in you looking at the document as is, because it's already had a lot of scrutiny to it. But it would be better for us to, after we've got all the feedback from the consultation, is then involve you at that stage, because it means that we've moved forward. You're better informed because you'll have the policy and you'll have the feedback, and we can consider that together. And we felt that that was more valuable to, and more relevant to actually moving the policy forward than looking at something before the membership have had a voice.
Sorry, Paul. I think that's a given, but I think the question is, once it comes back, is it pre or post scrutiny?
Well, that's an interesting question, because it depends how you want to approach it. My personal view is that I think it works better when, I mean, we talked about a lot of training. So I have a vision that we would get all of this together. We need to respect pension committee and local pension board, but sometimes I think we work better together. So an information day where we set aside time purely to look at this very important topic, and we look at structuring that day and getting, if we need professional advisors in to help answer your questions. This is a very important topic, and it needs to be given the right time and the right consideration. Now, you all know, apart from perhaps Val and Martin, how we work on our information days. So if I set that as an offering, then you can tell me whether you would like that or you would like a separate session just for local pension board members.
Thank you very much, Paul. Pension Board members, what are your feelings about that? I've got a hand up from Barry. Barry, would you like to comment?
Sorry, finding the mute button. My comment was more that we've basically put all these sort of plans in place, and pension committee have approved, like, basically the first draft to go out to consultation. But literally on Monday, Boris announced that the net zero target, they're basically bringing it forward to 2035. And of course, what we're putting out to consultation is probably a big part of it is based upon the 2050 date. Can the policy basically be updated easily to reflect these sorts of changes?
I'm happy to come in there.
Oh yes, please do. Paul,
I don't think it's that sensitive, Barry. We've already said that we would adhere to government regulation, and government regulation is what it is. So we have to mirror that in some way, and that will be part of the post review of the policy. If we need to amend the policy because we haven't got the right nuances to it, then so be it. That's what we'll do.
I think the problem with this is inevitably going to be that the goalposts will move, and government, legislation is legislation. We just have to, move with it. What do members feel particularly about Paul's suggestion of an information day jointly with the committee and the board? I think that has a lot to recommend it personally. Dennis.
Chairman, thank you. I think that could well be of good value, but I have to say that looking around, there are some people, certainly in Cambridge, who seem to be pretty expert on all of this. So what I would hope at that day is that the more valuable responses, even if they are a little extreme, to the consultation are actually available to us to gain an understanding of what people's views are of the current draft.
So I think, Paul, that would be fairly easy to implement, wouldn't it? Because, we presumably have a right to see the responses, do we not?
Well, absolutely. We will. We don't know exactly how we're going to handle responses. We know the volume and what they are. But we will absolutely be doing a report on the responses and the nature of the feedback that's come through. Absolutely. We're not here to hide anything. We're here to report what comes through. But as I say, it's very difficult to prejudge exactly what format it will take because we don't know what we're going to get back.
But it's fair to say we expect people to be diametrically opposed to continuing to invest in fossil fuels, and the professional advice is quite clear in terms of what the fund needs to do in terms of its to have a diverse range of assets. You don't tend to blanket divest from something, but you obviously will not invest in certain companies. Because even the processes in place at the moment will lead you not to invest in a company, for example, like Exxon. It wouldn't pass the current screens that our managers have. But expect there to be responses that are completely opposite of what we are proposing, and that's right and proper that they come in and that they are considered.
Yes, and again, if I can make another comment. If we do hold an information day, my vision is that we would have suitable experts to assist you with your questions. It wouldn't be officers answering those questions. We would get people who are actually experts in this field to help you understand any questions that you have, answer those in the most professional and most informed way.
I think that sounds fair enough. Are you happy with that response, Dennis?
Yes, Chairman.
And Barry, you've got your hand up.
It's just to further add to that discussion. So the experts you might get in, I know previously we have had investment experts, but it would be nice to have experts in, say, climate change to give their point of view.
I mean, we have experts who are on advising on climate change in the investment space. I mean, we can't get away that we're running a multi-billion-pound pension fund. That has and there's a fiduciary responsibility of the members to make sure that they're not taking undue risk in setting the investment strategy. So we do believe the appropriate professional advice is sort of climate change experts in the investment space, because it's absolutely right. Obviously, there are scientists who will be able to advise us on climate change itself, but you still have to then overlay, well, what does that mean for a large multi-billion-pound pension fund? So we do have to be very careful about where we source expertise.
Right.
Again,
Sorry, Chairman, I don't know if Paul wants to add anything as our.
No, I 100% agree with Market. The interesting thing is, are we, and being controversial, is our role to solve the issues of climate change or to actually manage, as Mark says, a multi-billion-pound pension fund? We're here to pay our pensioners their pensions that they're due, and we need to make sure that we follow government regulation and best practice. And we are very keen as an officers group, and I'm sure you're keen as a local board as well, to make sure that that is what we do and we don't lose sight of that. I would also say that the investment specialists are very pro solving the climate change issue. And, one of them actually said, even the minister, Guy Upperman, I mean, these are all very passionate people trying to tackle this problem, but they realise that the world we're in. And I'll leave you with one thought. It was Deirdre from 91, who runs a climate change or a responsible investment fund. She said, you won't solve climate change through divestment. And Guy Oppenheim has also indicated that as well. So, we're all here to make sure that we do, we want people to have their pensions for many, many years. Therefore, the planet needs to be in a good place. But your job is still, as I think you said, Councillor King, it's that knife edge, isn't it? It's that balancing act. Our job is to make sure we follow through the fiduciary duty that we have as a pension fund, that the Met Committee has to adhere to, and that you have to make sure that it is being adhered to as well, because you're here to look after member interests.
I would endorse all of that, Paul, and I think that all of the pension board members would as well. Are there any other questions or comments? I've got a hand up from Barry. Is that a legacy hand of yours?
No, Chair. It's just to continue. It's basically to come back on Paul's point.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we do have a fiduciary duty, but equally, as part of that fiduciary duty, there are non-financial factors. So Paul said it himself. Yes, we have to make sure there is enough money coming in to pay our pensioners, but we need a world where to exist to then pay those pensioners. So I know we have to take the non-financial factors into account.
So, Chairman, could I just come in just to explain the position of the fund as presented by the Pensions Committee, and that is quite simple, really. One, and this is what Paul was referring to in terms of the pension minister's comments. His view and our view is, and it has been a long-held view, is that you don't solve anything by moving assets from the hands of responsible investment owners to irresponsible. Secondly, what the fuel mix will look like in whether it's 2030 or 2050, it will still require significant amounts of fossil fuels. Thermal coal will clearly pretty much be eliminated as a fuel, but there will be significant amounts of oil, but particularly gas. and therefore the current, these current companies are incredibly important to this green transition. And so therefore, again, it makes sense to continue to invest in the best ones, not the ones like, like our Cytex as an example, who a lot of funds will tend not to invest in. But that really sort of sums up where we are in terms of our thinking as a fund. You would expect that non-financials analysis to and indeed the financial analysis to mean that investment managers will not pick those stocks, and if they do, the engagement process would be held with those investment managers as to why they are holding those stocks. But we've not actually, if I look at the two of the three main active funds that we invest in, two of them do not hold fossil fuels, and one does, which means that overall the Cambridgeshire Fund has about 1% of its assets in fossil fuels, which has decreased significantly from about 5% a number of years back. So it's quite a, but it's very, very, very targeted. So I hope that probably gives a bit of clarity about where the fund is at the moment.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah. Barry, are you happy with that?
Yes, Jared. Yeah, I don't dispute our approach of engagement and not to divest. It's just the fact that we do need to consider the non-financial factors in our investment.
Yes. I think it's also important to remember, though, Barry, sometimes investing in, responsible investment in renewables, for example, can actually be a very good investment in terms of returns if they're chosen appropriately. So I don't think it has to be, an either or. I think it is a balance, as I said earlier. But that's my personal view. Val, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, this is just where my head is at the moment with this. Not knowing the details of what specific investments we have, but an overview that we've got equities and bonds and etc. But surely these companies have also got to become carbon neutral. So therefore, if you're investing in them now, surely and they're good for for the pension fund, is the value in looking at actually what their plans are to become carbon neutral, instead of just saying, I'm not going to go with them because they're fossil fuels? That's sort of where my head is, because it is not a thing that has to be done by tomorrow. There are some dates, 2035, 2050, and obviously we need to do this as quickly as we possibly can, but without sort of getting just rid of those that are producing good returns for the funds. Do we look at what their plans are going forward for their carbon neutral reductions?
Our investment managers do, and that's what's discussed at meetings. So I mean, that's exactly I think the point really. It's you look at a couple of fuel majors, one will have a particular pathway they're on, and the other will be denying climate change altogether. You would invest in the former but not the latter.
I think we've had a really good discussion. I'm not seeing any other hands. And the only thing that I think we need to add, yet again, Rhiannon, sorry about this, to our action plan is this combined committee board seminar discussion meeting after the results of the survey have come back. So when do you think would be an appropriate time, Paul, for this to take place?
That's a really good question, Councillor King. I'd ask you that if you leave that with us, because we were quite keen, as Mark said, initially we were going to get the consultation out now, but that's been asked to wait until May. It's going to be the summer, or it might be early autumn. It's very difficult at this point in time. But we will, if you put it in there, we'll report to the next meeting a more logical time plan for it, but it'll be as soon as reasonably practical.
Of course. No, that's fine, Paul. But so, Rhiannon, if you could just add that to the action log with with a date post July, because that's our next meeting, isn't it? So it's going to be after July. The other thing that my feeling about this is that it is a very important topic, and I think it would benefit from a real meeting rather than a virtual meeting, because there are going to be quite a few people involved. And I think to encourage discussion, that would be a better format, personally. Again, I don't know what other people feel about it. If you disagree with that, please raise your hand. Barry, you've raised your hand.
I don't object to a real meeting, but with anything pandemic related, when it's appropriate and when it's safe. And I also believe that possibly you might want the choice. Some people still might not be comfortable coming to a real meeting. So if there was some sort of hybrid option.
Barry, thank you for that. That's a very good suggestion. I was thinking that if we're looking at post-July, you know, the vaccination should be well and truly rolled out by that time. But I think that offering a hybrid option is the way to go, perhaps. So, Paul, and Mark, if you could perhaps just, you know, sort of think about that and how best to handle it, that would be really good. Thank you. So, we've been asked to note the business plan and the medium-term strategy. And, oh, Dennis, you've got your hand up.
Chairman, I was just going to say that holding a virtual event would potentially facilitate getting experts on board. And to back, of course, Barry's comment that we would need to be secure. Whilst many people may be vaccinated by July, there will be those who won't, and there will certainly be a fair number who won't have had their second jab. So we just need to be sensitive to that.
Oh, absolutely, Dennis. I very much agree with you there. And I think that a hybrid perhaps might be the best option, but we can decide that nearer the time. Any other hands? Nope. So shall we move on then to the next agenda item? And this is Michelle, the effectiveness review. And first of all, Michelle, I need to say, I'm not sure if I did complete the questionnaire or not. If I didn't, I had a period of ill health at the turn of the year, and I also had some IT issues. So if I didn't, please accept my groveling apology at this point. Over to you, Michelle.
Thank you. So a bit of a background on the effectiveness review. So in line with the training strategy, we usually conduct this exercise on an annual basis. It was actually last undertaken in January 19 because of the pandemic last year. Focus turned to kind of more urgent business of the committee and the board. So on this occasion, the survey consisted of 23 questions, and it was to be completed in February this year. Obviously, we've had a bit of change in membership during the last year, but it just kind of gives us a starting point to address any concerns, and it's valuable to us because unless we know of any concerns you might have, we can't address those and obviously work together to make sure the board's as effective as it can be going forward. So under section 3, they are the results. So in the appendix are the full of results, sorry, but in section 4 are the conclusions that we've pulled out from the results. And what we've done is anything that's indicated as a disagree or strongly disagree comment, we have pulled out so that we can look into that in more detail for you. Obviously, the survey itself was on SurveyMonkey and was confidential. So this is just kind of a bit of an overview. And it may be members that are on the board now, or it might have been members that have since left us. But still, they're valid points to pick up and just to have a discussion about to see if we can get any further clarity or anybody wants to add anything to them. So there's a few there, and I won't go through all of them because a lot of them are actually quite similar in nature in terms to the comments about the resolution. But there's two that I will just pull out because there was additional comments on there as well. So the fourth one on the table that talks about how the board assists the admin authority. Really just kind of reiterate there that you as a board, we obviously give you as much information as we can. It's a bit of a combined approach. So current board members from last year and previous to that will know that there's elements of external and internal training. And actually, as we've just been discussing, the pension information days are really key for the board having the understanding to be able to challenge officers in terms of the quality of the reports and making sure that they have full understanding of what the reports are asking from them. In addition to that, as we've briefly talked about as well, it seems a really good time with potential change in membership from May onwards for the committee and board to relook at our training. So as part of that, there will be some induction training for any new members. And subsequently, we're looking to reintroduce the SIPA module training as well, and that all starts in June. So that's kind of a bit of a plan going forward about building confidence of new members and existing members. As we've previously touched on as well, it's the issue with the pre and post scrutiny of documents. We try really hard to get those into the agendas at the appropriate times. In an ideal world, they probably mostly would be pre-scrutiny, but sometimes because of the way that the agendas work, we have to hit a specific deadline. So it will come to you as a post-scrutiny document so that we can get, your feedback and comments either before or after the approval. So really, it was just a little bit of an extra explanation or comment on that particular one, just of the combined approach that we take. And obviously the most important thing, if you're ever unclear or need clarification or anything, please do let us know and we can do more on that. The only other point that I was going to raise, and we've partially just discussed it, but the second one in the grid was talking about the virtual meetings, which is obviously very relevant at the moment, and it's the first time obviously we'd be asking this question because usually they would all be face to face. So as it stands at the moment, we are set to go back to face-to-face meetings. They are obviously for the meetings that we need to do. But there is a question, well, firstly, I believe there might have been a challenge about that, so possibly, obviously, wait the outcome of that. But really, as Barry said previously, I think from an officer point of view, I think the idea would probably be some kind of hybrid solution. We personally think that virtual training sessions have worked very well over the last 12-month period. We've seen an increase in uptake in training, and it works very well in terms of joint training between Cambridgeshire and Northamptonshire as well. But really, this was just an opportunity to kind of pull that information together and really just open the forum up to you as board members. Firstly, if you have any specific thoughts about virtual meetings or face-to-face meetings that we did obviously briefly just touch upon, or anything else, it's just an opportunity for you to raise any further concerns or make any comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Questions or comments, anyone? Barry, you were first, then Dennis, then Val, then Joe.
Okay. It's just to reiterate what I said before about a hybrid solution for virtual meetings, because me personally, I'm not sure I'm comfortable And in my work setting, there are no plans to return to the office. So,
Harry, sorry, I might be able to offer some consolation there. The legislation that's dictating the end of face-to-face virtual meetings is actually only applies to the Pensions Committee and not the local pension board, because it's a different type of arrangement. So technically speaking, as it stands, we could get away with continuing to have virtual local pension board meetings unless the legislation is successfully challenged and overturned, so that pension committees can be virtual as well. So that's what.
No, that's very helpful, Joe. I didn't know that. But I mean, my feeling is actually that the virtual pension board meetings work well, partly because there are fewer people. I think the pension committee meetings are more problematic because of the large size of the committee, but that's just my personal. Barry.
Yeah, that seems to have answered my query. Yeah.
Okay. And I'm only seeing Val's hand up now. Dennis, you did have your hand up, I thought.
Yes, Chairman, thank you. I was going to make exactly the point that Joe very effectively made, so I really didn't need to say anything.
Thank you, Dennis. So Val, over to you.
I've got two things to say. One is I'm very pleased to hear about the virtual meetings can continue for the pension board. I'm sort of more comfortable with that. And just my second point was, I think it was back in 2018 or 2019, Aon did an effectiveness review on the board. I just wonder, have all the recommendations been implemented from that report?
Yes, they were. And as I understand it, we've got an internal report that just has highlighted that all of those have been input. So I think from memory, something was due to come last year, but obviously with the pandemic and everything, and then it kind of, as time went on, it seemed kind of less relevant as it went on. But we could send you the findings and the conclusions of that if you feel that'd be beneficial to have. We've got that information.
Michelle, I'm sorry, I don't mean to speak for you, Val, but I think it would be useful for all of the board members to see that. Would you agree with that, Val?
Seen the report itself, but what I haven't seen is how the recommendations have been addressed and when they were addressed, and sort of really the follow-up to it.
I do seem to remember we got something on that at some point, Michelle, but my memory could be at fault.
Yeah, I think we had a couple of sessions where we had, because we had the Aon observing, didn't we? And then they came back and presented their findings. But yeah, the bit that Val's talking about, the actual conclusions, everything got put into a table, and we've got the information of where it was, but I don't think it was shared with you in the end, because obviously more pressing matters took over. But we have got the information, so we can circulate that, certainly.
Would that be all right, Val?
Yes, that would be good. Thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you. Councillor Machini, Elisa.
I'm really sorry. I probably should have raised my hand a little earlier. I was just wondering about the court case that you were mentioning, because we were told that the outcome was going to be quite quick, something like the 20th or the 21st of April, but I'm assuming nobody knows when it's actually coming out, or did I miss something?
This is the one about continuing with virtual meetings, isn't it? Yeah. Anybody got any update on that?
Chair, through you, if I may. The court case took place on Wednesday, 21st of April. It concluded quite late in the evening. However, we're expecting a judgment fairly soon because of the expiry of the current regs is the 6th of May. So there is a sense of urgency around the judgment.
You're a font of all wisdom, Daniel. I'm most impressed. Thank you for that. And would it be possible, once the judgment is published, just to send a quick email saying whether virtual meetings can continue or not?
Yes, we'll do that. We'll circulate that to all members of the council as well.
Much appreciated, Daniel. Thank you. Is that all right, Elisa?
Yeah, absolutely. I am completely expecting officers to be quite quick with letting us know with this.
I'm sure they will.
I was feeling really bad. I don't want to email people randomly and say, please let me know this, because I'm sure they would if they knew themselves. But, you know, since it was mentioned, it was all.
We should know pretty soon. Thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands up. So can I just make two comments on this, Michelle, if I may? The first one is that it's really important when we next do this effectiveness review that all board members respond, including me. And I can't remember if I did or not. So again, you know, I'm not saying that I did or didn't. I can't remember. So, but it's really important that we all respond. The second thing is that the concern raised that we just rubber stamp officers' reports. I have to say that's not what I have seen during my time on the pension board. I think that we provide a reasonable level of challenge, and I just don't recognise that at all. But and I think that I just want to echo Michelle's comment that if somebody is saying that they lack experience and that's why they're not challenging reports and procedures, then there is an easy solution for that, and it's actually to contact officers, you know, for guidance and questions, as Val has done very effectively since she's been a member. So really there is an answer to that, and I hope that all of you will, you know, will take advantage of that offer from Michelle. So we're being asked on this one then to note the feedback and approve the plan of action to improve the effectiveness of the pension fund board. And so does this mean that a future report will be coming back to us, Michelle, saying how the this is going to be implemented or not?
Yeah, what we usually do is when we do the following year report, we normally have an appendix which shows the previous year's actions have been completed. For this particular one, because of the 2-year gap in between, it seemed a bit irrelevant to do that on this occasion. But what will happen is next year, we will conclude this year's report and bring up any other issues that have been raised. I think on this occasion, most of it should be covered with the new training plan that we've got in place. So, yeah.
I think it wouldn't do any harm to add the effectiveness survey to our forward to our action plan, because I think that will encourage all of us, including me, if I was one of the guilty ones, to actually respond to it when you circulate it. So, Rhiannon, if you could add that to the action plan, that would be very helpful, I think, in jogging our memories. Okay, so we move on then to, no hands up, no. We move on to agenda item 9, and this is Joe. So, Joe, can I just ask you to introduce this report, please?
Thank you. Yep. So for the benefit of Martin again, at each meeting I present a report entitled Governance and Compliance Report, where I go through some of the emerging issues with regulations and the pensions regulator with regards to how we run and manage our scheme at the LGPS. So this is that report. So starting to go through it. Now, the last few meetings we've talked at length about the public sector exit cap. And as you'll recall, it came into force on the 4th of November. It didn't work very well, and it did not work with the current LGPS regulations and put us in a very difficult position with regards to any redundancy retirements that took place after the 4th of November because of the regulations contradicting each other. But then on the 25th of February, the overriding regulations were formally revoked. as if they never existed. And any cases that had been processed during this time where exit payments have been restricted to the 95,000 limit would have to be reversed and reinstated as a full benefit. We were fortunate within the Cambridgeshire Pension Fund that we didn't actually have any cases, so we didn't have any rectification work to do on that. Where we are now is that with the government realising there were some unintended consequences as a result of the previous set of regulations, they have gone away to work on a new set, which they will consult on. Then they're not going to hang around. They're not going to take 6 years like last time. They are promising to come back with something very shortly, which we expect to be about the summer, and with an intention that there will still definitely be some form of exit payment cap. So we don't know any of the details as yet, but we are continuing to advise our employers and our scheme members when we produce such calculations that the exit cap could come back in short order, so as there's no surprise should that happen quite quickly. So that's where we are with that. I don't intend to report on that again unless there's, well, maybe by July we'll have the consultation, so maybe I will be, so who knows. But that's the current position. So all the work we did to implement this for those couple of months has now been undone, and we wait to see what we need to do in the future on that. So the next item in this report, and I must apologise for the dodgy numbering on some of this report, that's totally my fault, so apologies for that. Section 3, the Scheme Advisory Board Good Governance Review. Now this has finally moved on a stage. You'll remember back in 2020, March 2020, before the world turned, I did a short presentation on this at Boston Lakes as to the Scheme Advisory Board's recommendations for improved governance across the LGPS schemes. They've now moved on from phase 2, which was coming up with some design principles for better governance, to phase 3, where they've actually put forward recommendations to MHCLG as how governance can be improved across the LGPS. As you can see in section 3.2 of this report are some of the main recommendations. I'll just go through them very briefly. The introduction of an LGPS senior officer with the view that they would not be conflicted, although arguably they could still be, depending on what type of role that this person actually has as a second role. Conflicts of interest are to be much further looked into, where we have a policy on conflicts of interest and how we manage them. Representation should be clearly laid out in a policy. We do have a kind of a policy, a governance and compliance statement where it's laid out, but it doesn't give any of the justifications for why the pension committee is established in the way it is, or why the local pension board has the members it has. So there'll be further governance to come on that. Skills and training, again, this is going to be strengthened from what it currently stands at, because technically speaking, in the regulations, the pension committee is not required to have any formal training, but the local pension board is. So that's going to be strengthened, thankfully, and that will also include section 151 officers, because that also isn't legislated at the moment. Service delivery, regulation change to make it compulsory for an administering authority to publish an administration strategy. We already have one because the regulations read the word as the word may have in place, administration strategy. That will be strengthened to must have. Key performance indicators, they're looking at standardizing those across the industry. And business planning processes, which I feel we're quite good at, but not all funds deliver business planning to the same standard. So there'll be tighter regulation on that. So we wait to hear what MHCLG make of these recommendations. Some will require amending regulations or statutory guidance. Some of these recommendations we may be able to put in place before or without any of that. So we wait to hear what happens with that, and full details, if you want to find out more, there's a hyperlink there in section 3.4 of the report. So the next item on this report is the Pensions Regulator's new code of practice. Currently, the Pensions Regulator has 15 codes of practice. Number 14 really only affects public sector pension schemes, but with bits of it covered in other codes of practice. And the Pensions Regulator decided to put it into all 15 codes into one, with a view that it will be fully searchable online. But that part of it hasn't been built yet. So what we have, and if I may demonstrate, is a consultation which has just been launched to read through all of this and for us to comment on what we think of the new code of practice. There are some thoughts that it probably, without the online version, it may not be the most effective consultation that we can respond to, because we're going to have to read all this and see if there are any changes to the current code of practice. There are supposed to be some, but I'm not sure it's going to be too easy to find when it's embedded with lots of items that we previously didn't have to worry about because we aren't a defined contribution scheme and matters like that. But certainly within the code of practice, they're strengthening what they expect pension schemes to do in respect of cybercrime, which we've already talked about today, about climate change. There's all sorts of things in there that wasn't previously in the code of practice. So we're going to have a good read through and see what is looking to be changed. The pensions regulator expect to complete the consultation and launch it in the code of practice in its formal form by, I think, November or December this year. And then we have, I think it's now 6 months to become compliant with it. It was previously 12. So there'll be a piece of work for us to do to make sure that we are compliant with that new code of practice when it arrives. So that is that. We are looking to do a consultation on it, but like I say, it won't be the complete consultation that the pensions regulator is expecting, because we're not going to spend time commenting on areas of it which don't affect the LGPS. Other than that, there's not too much more I wanted to talk about, other than the Pension Schemes Act 2021 has received royal assent, but regulations do not yet exist to enforce any of that, and how it affects the LGPS is still a little bit unknown. But what we do know, we are expecting some of the outcomes of the Pensions Act to affect areas such as climate risk reporting, pension dashboards, and transfers out, but we wait to hear more on that. One other note before I finish.
Joe, you.
Is it me that's frozen or Councillor King?
No,
you're okay.
I think.
Okay, I think he's gone. Is he gone? I was going to just say, whilst, and I will reiterate this to Councillor King when he returns, the training events appendix, we've had to do some moving around of dates because we want to be holding these virtual training sessions with Northamptonshire, and there's been some changes at their end as to what dates become viable. So the 10th of June training date is now going to be the 7th of June, but we will circulate those dates nearer the time when we've got when we know who our board members and committee members are going forward. So that's me finished. So pending the return of Councillor King. Do we have a deputy chairman?
That will be me.
Over to you then, Barry.
Okay. I guess I just have to open it up to any questions or comments. I'm not seeing any hands raised. Of course, we may have to go back to Councillor King returns.
Is it worth considering a 5-minute comfort break while we wait for Councillor King to rejoin us?
Yep, sounds a sensible idea, Paul.
I need to be away at 12:30, so quite happy with the comfort break, but just flagging that I will have to leave at 12:30, whatever.
Me too, Dennis, so yeah.
I say if we just give it 2 or 3 minutes, it just gives him time to rejoin, doesn't it? And anybody who needs a comfort break to take one.
If everyone wanted to turn off their videos and put their stuff on mute, that would be great. Thank you.
And that's a shame Councillor King hasn't rejoined us, has he? Never mind. Rhiannon, have you rang him at all? Have you able to ring him?
So Dan is ringing him, but I'm going to send across the chairman's briefing note in case he isn't able to join. That's okay.
Councillor King is attempting to rejoin. However, he doesn't seem to be too optimistic. So if Barry can take over the chairing duties in the meantime, and if he is able to rejoin, he will do.
Brilliant. Well done.
Okay. So no
Are
problem.
we still live on YouTube?
We are for the moment.
Oh,
Okay. Okay, so I will be taken over. So I did open it up to any questions or comments, and we didn't seem to have any. So on that report, it does also seems to be the agenda plan. Has anyone got any thoughts about that? Any
That should be
raise
the
hand?
next item,
Oh, right.
Barry, the agenda plan. I think it's just the training plan that's attached to that one.
Oh, right, okay. Okay, well, we'll move to that next item then. It seems quite logical to me. Has anyone got any comments or regarding the agenda plan?
Can I just make a comment on the agenda plan, please? So
Yeah.
as you'll see, this time round, everything that's on there is just standing items at the moment.
Yeah.
That's because what we need to do now is, following the approval of the business plan, we need to map out every activity in the business plan and map it against a committee or a board meeting. And we also obviously need to work out any other policies or strategies that are due to come back as well. So for the July meeting, that will be fully updated with everything that's due for the year. Thank you.
So related to that, are we gonna, before the July meeting, we gonna get like an update of that agenda plan once it's worked out?
Yeah, what I can either do, I can either send round what we're bringing to July once we know that, so you've got that ahead of the next meeting, or I can just circulate the whole agenda plan before the meeting. It's entirely up to you what you prefer.
I think whatever's easiest, as long as we have the July plan ahead of.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
And we can take it from there. So, I'm not sure what the wording is, but I believe the next item.
I think you got a question from Val. Sorry, Chairman.
Oh, sorry. Yes, go ahead, Val.
Thank you. I don't know whether this is the right time to say this, but I'm afraid I'm going to have to give my apologies for the 2nd of July meeting because I'm actually on annual leave. I have raised this. I did raise this earlier on in the year and let somebody know, and I can't remember who it was.
Yeah, just as long as Rhiannon, it's that it's noted that we've already had apologies.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure it's fine.
All right, thank you.
Okay. So I believe the next section is a closed section that we need to go into a closed session. I'm not sure what the wording I have to read out.
So, Chair, you need to formally propose that the press and public be excluded from the meeting.
Okay.
On grounds that the following item contains confidential information.
Yeah. So can I propose that the press and public are excluded from the meeting on the basis that the next section contains confidential information? Do I have any objections to that? I don't see any raised hands. So, yeah, I formally make this a closed session.